My name is Rachel, and I've been married for 8 years. When I met my husband, Josh, I thought I had found the perfect partner. He was caring, kind, and always supportive. We were the couple that others admired, the ones people envied. But over time, something changed. I no longer felt the spark that had once defined our relationship. Josh was a man of routine, and our life had become predictable. Morning kisses had turned into mere formalities. Dinners had become silent rituals in front of the television. I always knew that marriage required effort, but this stability had begun to suffocate me. My job at an advertising agency became my sanctuary. It was thrilling. Deadlines, creative brainstorming, new connections. Work made me feel alive, important, and interesting. There was no place for routine in my office, and that's where I met Harry. Harry had joined our company as the new creative director. His charisma was undeniable from the moment he walked in. He was confident, witty, and his ideas always stood out. But what struck me the most was his gaze. He looked at me in a way that made me feel seen in a way no one else had in years. One evening, after a team meeting, we found ourselves alone in the conference room. He joked about how everyone feared his blunt critiques, and I laughed. "I always thought you were the serious type, Harry," I teased. He tilted his head slightly, smirking. "And you thought I didn't know how to loosen up?" His eyes lingered on me just a moment too long. In that instant, I felt something I hadn't in years. My heart raced, and I quickly looked away, trying to mask my sudden unease. That night, on my way home, I couldn't stop thinking about Harry. What was that? Just harmless flirting? Or something more? I tried convincing myself it was just a fleeting emotion, triggered by my exhaustion from routine. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something was missing in my life, and I wasn't sure if I could get it back. Josh greeted me at home with his usual, "How was your day?" without even looking up from his phone. And at that moment, I felt something shift inside me. I began to wonder, do I really want to spend the rest of my life in a marriage that is peaceful, but lifeless? The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling. I couldn't stop thinking about Harry. I tried to push the thoughts away, reminding myself that I was married and that even entertaining the idea of another man was wrong. But something inside me kept craving his gaze during meetings, the sound of his voice, the feeling of being seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. At work, an office-wide dinner was announced to celebrate the successful completion of a project. Harry approached my desk, holding an invitation in his hand. "Rachel, I hope you'll be there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on some new ideas I've been working on," he said, handing me the card. His tone was professional, but his eyes were not. They lingered on me just a little too long, sending a wave of nervous anticipation through my body. "I'll try," I responded, keeping my voice steady. That evening at home, I mentioned the dinner to Josh. He simply nodded, not even asking for details. No curiosity, no reaction at all. It infuriated me. Why didn't he care? Why didn't he even pretend to be interested in my life? The dinner had a relaxed atmosphere. Harry was the center of attention, charismatic, effortlessly commanding the room with his humor and charm. But I noticed how often his gaze found mine across the table. Later in the night, as the crowd thinned, we ended up sitting alone. He ordered another glass of wine and leaned in slightly. "Have you ever felt like you're living a life that isn't really yours?" His question caught me off guard. I hesitated before answering. "Maybe." "Why do you ask?" "Because you look like someone holding herself back. But I have a feeling you're capable of so much more." His words hit deeper than I wanted them to. Harry lifted his glass and smiled. "To you, Rachel." It was such a simple gesture, yet filled with meaning. When most people had left, Harry offered to drive me home. I knew it was a bad idea, but I said yes. The drive was quiet, thick with tension. We both knew something was happening, but neither of us acknowledged it. When he pulled up in front of my house, he didn't unlock the doors immediately. Instead, he turned to me, leaning in just slightly. "You know there's something between us," he whispered. "I can see it in your eyes." I had no words. His lips were close, so close. I could have stopped it. I didn't. Our first kiss was passionate, forbidden, filled with a desire I had buried for too long. When I walked into my house, my heart was racing. Josh was already asleep, completely unaware of what had just happened. I stood there, looking at him, feeling a wave of guilt crash over me. But I also couldn't erase the memory of Harry's touch, his kiss, the way he made me feel alive. That night, I knew one thing for certain. My life would never be the same again. After that night, I knew I had crossed a line I could never undo. But instead of stopping, I felt a rush of adrenaline, an intoxicating thrill that made me crave my next encounter with Harry. Guilt mixed with excitement, creating a dangerous addiction I wasn't ready to let go of. The next day, I tried to act as normal as possible, but when Harry walked into the office, my heart raced. His expression was calm and confident, as if nothing had happened. But when our eyes met, that same spark ignited between us, making me forget everything. "Rachel, we have a few questions about the presentation. Can you spare some time?" he asked, approaching my desk. "Of course," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. We worked together in the conference room, and every moment alone with him was charged with tension. When his hand accidentally brushed against mine, a jolt of electricity shot through my body. "Are you okay?" he asked with a subtle smirk. "Yeah, just a little tired," I lied. But he could see right through me. That evening, while sitting next to Josh on the couch, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Harry. "I've been thinking about you all day. I can't focus." A surge of emotions crashed over me. Josh sat beside me, eyes glued to the TV, completely unaware as I slid my phone under a pillow. "What's up?" he asked, not even looking at me. "Nothing. Just a work message," I replied. It sounded so natural that he didn't suspect a thing. Harry and I began texting constantly. His words were full of desire, attention, and longing. Everything I had been missing in my marriage. One evening, Harry suggested we meet outside of work. I hesitated at first, but eventually gave in. We picked a restaurant on the other side of town, far from anyone who might recognize us. At dinner, he looked at me in a way Josh hadn't in years. We talked for hours about work, childhood, dreams, things I hadn't spoken about in ages. For the first time in a long time, I felt alive. As we left the restaurant, he reached for my hand. "I don't want to let you go, Rachel," he whispered. We got into his car, and this time, we didn't stop. His kisses were hungry. His touch sent shivers down my spine. I lost myself in him completely. When I got home, Josh was already asleep. I stood in the doorway, looking at him, my chest tightening with guilt. But at the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about Harry. He had become the thing that filled the void in my marriage, the one thing I craved even though I knew it could destroy everything. I had officially stepped into a double life. By day, I was the perfect wife, supporting my husband. By night, I was a woman who couldn't stop herself, knowing full well that this could all come crashing down. My double life was becoming more dangerous by the day. Every moment with Harry made me feel alive, but at the same time, I lived in constant fear that Josh would find out. My excuses were getting more elaborate, my lies more frequent. I was walking a tightrope, and one wrong step could send everything crashing down. One evening, I came home later than usual. Josh was sitting on the couch, arms crossed. "Where were you?" he asked, looking directly into my eyes. I froze. His tone was calm but cold. A meeting with clients ran late. I lied quickly, forcing my voice to stay steady. He raised an eyebrow, his gaze unwavering. Clients? At a restaurant on the other side of town. A chill ran through me. He knew something. But instead of pushing further, he simply nodded and went to bed, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. The next day, I met Harry again. We chose a hotel on the outskirts of the city, somewhere no one would recognize us. As soon as we were alone, I felt the tension of my real life melt away, if only for a few hours. "You look tense," Harry murmured, wrapping his arms around me. "Josh is suspicious," I admitted. Harry frowned. "We need to be more careful." "But Rachel, I don't want to lose you." His words were sincere, but deep down, I knew this was a game that couldn't last forever. One afternoon, Harry and I were having lunch together in a cafe when I spotted a familiar face.
Kelly.
She was a friend of Josh's from work, and she had seen me. Her eyes widened, but she didn't say anything. She simply walked past, her expression unreadable.
"Who was that?"
Harry asked, noticing my sudden tension. "Someone who knows Josh," I whispered. The moment sent a shockwave of realization through me. I was getting too close to the edge. That evening, Josh was acting strangely.
Too calm.
Too observant. "I ran into Kelly today," he said casually over dinner. My stomach dropped. "Oh? What did she say?" "Nothing much. Just mentioned she saw you at a cafe today." I forced myself to breathe. "Yeah, I was with a colleague. We were going over a project," I said smoothly, hoping it sounded natural. Josh didn't respond. He simply nodded and continued eating. But I could feel it. The cracks in his trust had begun to form. The more time I spent with Harry, the more I realized that this situation couldn't last forever. I was trying to balance two worlds, but each encounter with Josh felt like a test, one that I was bound to fail eventually. I had thought I could have both, the stability of my marriage and the passion I found with Harry. But deep down, I knew I was running out of time. I couldn't sleep anymore. Every conversation with Josh was filled with tension. Every glance from Harry made me forget everything except him. I felt my double life falling apart, the walls closing in around me. One evening, I told Josh I had to stay late at work. But he didn't believe me this time. Instead, he followed me. I met Harry at the same cafe where we had spent time together before. We sat close, laughing, sharing secrets. At one point, Harry reached for my hand. "I wish we didn't have to hide anymore," he said, his eyes locked onto mine. I was about to respond, when suddenly, I saw Josh walk through the door. Our eyes met. My heart stopped. Josh marched toward us, his expression unreadable, calm, but dangerous. "Rachel," he said coolly, "you never mentioned that your colleagues had such intimate business meetings." Harry pulled his hand away, but it was too late. Josh had seen everything. "Maybe we should talk about this at home," I said quickly, panic creeping into my voice. "No," he said firmly. "We talk about this now." "Who is he to you, Rachel?" His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight of betrayal so heavy I couldn't meet his gaze. Harry tried to step in. "Listen, it's not what you think." Josh turned to him sharply. "Don't
say
a word. This is between me and my wife." I stayed silent, because I had no excuse. The drive home was silent and suffocating. When we arrived, Josh sat at the table, gesturing for me to sit across from him. "Explain," he said. I searched for words, but there were none. I don't know what to say, Josh." "You don't know?" His voice wavered between rage and heartbreak. "You cheated on me, Rachel, and you don't know what to say?" I tried to reason to soften the blow. "It's not what you think." His voice snapped. Then what is it? Tell me. And at that moment, for the first time, I truly saw the damage I had done. The next day, I arrived at work, but Harry was gone. His office was empty, his desk cleared. A coworker mentioned that he had resigned suddenly. He didn't say anything. Just left, she added. I felt my world collapse. Harry was gone. He had left me to deal with the ruins. Josh stopped talking to me. A week later, he filed for divorce. And just like that, it was over. My husband, my lover, my illusion of a perfect life.
Gone.
I sat alone in our empty house, once filled with warmth. Now it felt cold, foreign, and I finally realized I had lost everything. After Josh left and Harry disappeared, I was left alone, with my thoughts, my regrets, and an empty house. At first, it felt like a nightmare, as if everything I had was gone in an instant. I could no longer run from myself, from my guilt, or from the pain I had caused others. For days, I tried to find Harry. I sent messages. No response. I called him, straight to voicemail. Desperation drove me to his apartment, but when I arrived, the door was locked, and the neighbors told me he had moved out. That was when it hit me. I had lost not just my husband, but my lover too. I couldn't understand why he just vanished, leaving me alone with all of this. Things at work weren't any better. Colleagues whispered behind my back. I could feel their stares, their judgment. Then my boss called me into his office. Rachel, I don't know all the details, he began, but this situation is affecting the team. Maybe you should take some time off. I nodded. I was too ashamed to even argue. One evening, I gathered the courage to text Josh. Can we talk? I want to explain. His reply came quickly. There's nothing to explain. I've filed for divorce. That was it. No more chances. No more second thoughts. It was truly over. Alone, I began to ask myself the real questions. Why did I cheat? Why didn't I try to fix my marriage instead of destroying it? I started seeing a therapist, hoping to make sense of it all. Through those sessions, I realized something painful. It wasn't just about Josh. The problem was me. I had searched for something in Harry that I had felt was missing in my marriage. But the truth was, I had been lost long before he arrived. Months passed. I sold the house, moved into a small apartment in the city. I joined a support group for people who had gone through divorce. For the first time, I felt understood. One evening, a woman in the group said something that stayed with me. We can't change the past, but we can take responsibility for our future. Her words became my guidepost. I decided that, this time, I would start a new chapter, without lies, without betrayal, and without running from myself. 6 months had passed since my life fell apart. I was no longer the Rachel who hid behind the facade of a perfect life. Everything I had gone through forced me to reevaluate myself, my priorities, and the person I wanted to become. One morning, after returning from my support group, I checked my mailbox and found a letter. It was from Harry. My hands trembled as I tore open the envelope. Rachel, I know that disappearing on you is unfair, but I had to leave. I realized that we became part of something that was never meant to end well. You deserve more than a hidden relationship. I hope you find peace in your life. Harry. I read the letter over and over again. It was our final goodbye. And strangely, I didn't feel anger or resentment, just a deep sadness and a quiet gratitude that he had at least said goodbye. Josh and I hadn't spoken since our separation. But one day, I saw him in a cafe. He was with another woman. They were laughing, holding hands. At first, a sharp pang of jealousy hit me. But then I realized he had found his happiness. I took a deep breath and approached him. Hey, Josh. He turned and looked at me. Rachel.
Hey.
It was awkward, but we both knew it was necessary. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve that, I admitted. Josh studied me for a moment before nodding.
Thank you, he said simply.
I hope you find what you're looking for too. It was a short conversation, but it closed the chapter we had left unfinished. I started teaching yoga at a local wellness center. It became my way of healing, of rebuilding myself, physically, emotionally, and mentally. For the first time in a long time, I felt balanced. I met new people, found new passions, and rediscovered a sense of purpose in my life. One afternoon during a class, I noticed a new group of students. Among them, a man smiled at me. I smiled back. It was a simple moment, nothing more. But it made me realize I was ready. I can't change the past. But now I understand that every mistake, every heartbreak, every choice I made shaped me into the person I am today. I am no longer hiding behind illusions. I am living honestly with myself and with others. And that, more than anything, is what truly matters.
Please subscribe to our channel Stellar Stories. We have new amazing stories coming out every day. Thank you.